business, which is financial coaching and bookkeeping for entrepreneurs, and really trying to help be people both in their personal lives with their business, with their money, as well as their businesses. So as you can see, these webinars are switching between personal finance to small business. Today is going to be about investing, which we go back to personal finance. Next week is going to be about cash flow planning for small businesses. And then the very last one will be about budgeting. And so there'll be 5 free webinars in the month of April. We'll decide what happens after that. And so today we're going to be talking a lot about investing. And so as a disclaimer, I am not an investment advisor of any sort. I've just been, in studying this investment for a really long time on my own. And most of this knowledge, I like to say, is it's available, but I like to approach it in a way that's easy for people to understand and come with a lot of compassion and love for an area that people don't really have a lot of knowledge around, right? We hear about investing, we hear about stocks, or right now, we are freaked out and we don't want to invest anymore and we just want to freeze, right? And so really talking through what exactly is investments, what are we really talking about, putting some simple definitions to it so that we can decide how we want to move forward with investments at this point in time. So, investment is always really a hot topic in really great times, right? And also in really bad times. And as I said in the last webinar, what started as a health crisis has now turned into a financial crisis. And as we see that the public markets really have dropped, on one day, 34%, and it's kind of came back a little bit to 25%. So I'll explain a little bit more about that. And so the question that I've been, getting around this is a lot of different ways of saying, should I still invest, right, during this time? Where should I be putting my money? What actions should I take with my retirement? And these are all the same questions that we should be asking ourselves during normal financial times, right? And in these times, our first reaction is to freeze and not do anything, or to sell, right? And so we'll have to talk about kind of how to become more risk. How do we tolerate risk, and how much do we actually want to tolerate that? So what I wanted to actually start today, because the CARES Act that got passed on March 27th, a huge part of it actually dealt with retirement. And so I wanted to mention it to you, even though it's something that I'm not recommending people do. I do want to mention it because I want you guys to understand what is available and why we don't necessarily want to take advantage of this particular part of the CARES Act, okay? So what the CARES Act is doing is allowing a penalty-free withdrawal from your retirement accounts, right? So what that means is usually if you're under the age of 59 and a half, which I can't see everybody, but I think we're all in that boat. If you take out money early, you get 10% penalized right off the top, right? So if you had $100 in your 401k or retirement accounts and you took it out, you would be essentially 10% would go straight into a penalty. And then you would only get 90% of it, okay? Or $90. However, so right now they're allowing people to take up to $100,000 without this penalty. Okay, so a lot of people are looking at their 401k like, ooh, that's looking really good right now as an option, right? Because they're like, oh, it's penalty free, I can just take it out. However, it is not tax free. So when you take out money, it is still considered income to you. So you still have to pay taxes on it. And so while, yes, you do, not have to pay the penalty, you still have to pay taxes. And what they're saying as well, that's still, if your federal rate is 25%, plus if you're in a state like California, our state tax is roughly 10%, that's still a 35% income tax on the amount that you're going to withdraw. So now what is $100 is now not, it still stays 100, but you still have to pay taxes. So now it's $65, right? So, the other part of it is that they're allowing you to recontribute the money back in. So let's say you took $100 out. They're saying, okay, you can take it out for this emergency, but you can put it back in, right? And usually you can only contribute like $16,000 a year, but the money you've put back in is not counted toward that, okay? So the second part of it is they're allowing people to borrow from their retirement more than they could before, okay? So it's usually around like 50,000 or 50% of your vested balance. And so right now they're allowing, again, up to $100,000 or 100% of your vested balance. So you could basically, if you have $100,000 in your retirement account, you can basically take all of it out, or you can borrow against it. And so these two are the attributes of the CARES Act that you might be hearing about and wondering like whether or not you should or should not touch it and things of that sort. And really, like, this is the last resort. And like I said, like, I don't want to mention this because this is not like, we do not want to do this, and I'll explain why. But I wanted to make sure that you guys are aware of like what is being talked about when people are like, oh, you could totally take money out, and what are the implications. So why shouldn't you touch it, right? Because basically what you're doing is you are essentially borrowing for your future self. You're saying, hey, future, I have, been really, religiously putting money in, but right now I need it and I'm going to take it all out, right? And so you're wiping away years of contributions up to $100,000. That's, if you had contributed to the max, that's, let's say like 10 good years of contributions. So you wipe all of that, all of the time that it had to grow, to accumulate, and the good habits of actually contributing to it. And so, and let's like really honestly face it, if you're going to take it out because you're about to run out of money for your daily needs, there is no guarantee that you're actually going to be able to put the money back, right? This is something, as a financial coach, one of the things I see so difficult for, employees with 401k and self-employed, business owners, it takes a lot to part with that money for our future self. And so what the government is saying, here's a free all, go for it. And I'm like, no, this is just a really, really bad idea, because what you're going to do is you're probably going to take that money out and you're going to use it because you're going to need it for everyday expenses. So the percentage of people actually putting that money back in, I would say close to zero, right? And so you basically will take all of the, hard-earned contributions and wipe it to zero. Because a lot of times, right, if you look at the stats, even 100,000 people are like, geez, who has $100,000 in retirement, right? And so if you have less than that and you're going to wipe it all out, that's still years that we've, taken, right? And so, and third, when it's not invested in the market, the money has no chance to grow, right? When you spend it on your everyday savings, everyday expenses, it's done. There's no more accumulation, there's no more growth, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And so one of the questions that I've been, so that's kind of the CARES Act. And so we'll talk about investments in general. And one of the questions that I keep hearing right now is, where should you put your money? And really, what I like to say, cash is king, cash is still king, and now cash is telling why right? Telling us why it is king, right? Because everybody is scrambling for cash right now. So if you've missed my first webinar, I really did talk extensively around what it is an emergency savings. So ask us for that webinar if you need that link again. But really, that's where you should put your money first and foremost, right? Is always making sure that you have enough cushion in that cash so that you can really start to do some of these other things. Emergency savings, right? Especially if you are a business owner, you need to have emergency saving in your business, and then you need to have emergency saving for your personal. Because the way I look at it is, if you're a business owner and you have personal, obviously you have a life, they stack on top of each other. And if the business stops and it stops contributing, you have a few more months of savings in here to contribute to your personal expenses. And then you have a few more months here, right? And so it's really just a trickle down effect. And so what happens, why this particular financial crisis, with the shelter in place, it shut off all the small businesses if they were not considered essential. Even if they were considered essential, I have chiropractors as clients, they're going back 40% of the time, maybe, right? And even they're open, clients are not really comfortable or unable to come in because they have children or because they don't have the income to support that, that kind of expense anymore, right? So really, if you don't have enough emergency cash, like, then the rest of it really isn't going to be helpful, right? You really need to have that first, okay? And then in terms of priority, okay, in terms of investing, is for those of you who have employers and they are doing matching, that's your first, where you put your money first and always, because company matching is 100% free money, always, right? So people are always wondering, oh, if I should, put in a certain amount. You know, you would be surprised that people that that work for companies that have free matching still do not contribute. That's like throwing away free money, right? So if you are in this particular if you are lucky enough to be working with the employer that has a match, you've got to take advantage of that, right? And if you're lucky enough to work for an employer that has a 401k, right, we are going to max all of that out, right? Because first and foremost, those, number one, it'll reduce your taxes. And number two, it is such an automatic way for money to just get pulled straight. And so what does that mean for gig workers, sole proprietors, and business owners? Is that you have to put in that practice for yourself, right? So if you're a sole proprietor, you can open up a what is known as a SEP IRA or a self-employment IRA, right? Or you can open up your own IRA, and so forth. Okay, so in terms of priority, right? Cash, matching, retirement. Excuse me. Mommy's on the phone right now. Can I talk to you later? Sorry about that. Yeah, so, and then after you've had a chance to really sort of start contributing in the stock markets, you might think about other types of investments like real estate or even just a regular brokerage, right? And so really though, what I've been finding most as a financial coach for, as I coach corporate, and they bring me on to talk to their employees, a lot of people don't contribute to their 401ks. And it's such a great benefit when an employer provides that, right? Because you can contribute up to 16,500 versus if you were to open up your own IRA, it's 5,500. That's a huge difference in how much you can actually contribute. And so, as we really start thinking about after cash, we start thinking about retirement, long-term planning, long-term investments, before we think about, any other type of investments that take, because really, if you think about, retirement, you can contribute $5, you can contribute $20, you can contribute $100 paycheck. Whereas, if you start to get into real estate or things like that, it takes a lot more to buy a house. It takes a lot more to become a landlord, right? And then after all of that is when you can to really start thinking about having a regular investment account, mostly because that doesn't have as much tax protection as you do with your retirements. So, in terms of sort of priority. So what I really wanted to talk about investments is about the cycle of public markets. And so we're going to talk through about like three simple, really simple rules and facts around investment and why, we are still going to invest in the public market. Okay. So you guys might heard of I posted a chart yesterday of a Dow Jones Industrial. So there's three major stock index, right? There's the S&P 500, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and then you might have heard of the NASDAQ. And all of them are just basically, so S&P, it's called S&P 500 because it's a mix of 500 largest company. It is the best approximation of what the entire market is doing. The Dow Jones Industrial has 30 large companies, and then NASDAQ has a blend. So these major indexes just gives you a really great idea about what is happening in the stock market. And so I wanted to kind of show you guys what the long term of these look like, okay? So, you might hear, the Dow Jones is at blah, blah, blah. S&P 500 is at blah, 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 right? The stock market is down. So in 1990, the S&P was at $325. In 2000, which is 10 years later, it was $14.41, right? That is almost a 5x jump in a 10-year span. And as we all know, in 2008 and 2009, there was a huge crash, just like we're experiencing at the moment. And that crash, the S&P 500 went from 1441 to 826. Ouchies, right? But we all survived. In 2010, it went back to 1102, right? And guess right now in 2020 what that number is? It's at 2765. So, right, if you think about if you had invested 10 years ago, S&P was at 1102, and right now it's at 2765. Just in the last 10 years, okay? If you did last 20 years or 30 years, right? 1990 was at 325, and now it is in 2,765. So what I want to say is that at the peak of S&P on February 19th, right before this whole thing started to go, the S&P was at 3,386. In about a 5-week span, it dropped to 2,237. That is a 34% drop, right? So most of us are looking at this very narrow window and going, oh my God, right? Holy crap, oh my God, the world is coming to an end, right? Because it dropped 30%, which is a lot, right? But it has since come back. And when you're looking at the larger picture, right? This is what I often say. This is our relationship with our finances is a lifetime relationship. It's not a one and done, right? It's a continual relationship that we have. And the one we have with stock markets is one that is very long-term view, okay? And so really, you're looking at, when you start looking at, 10 years ago, you would have doubled your money, right? Same thing with 20 years ago, right? And so if you look at these charts, you're saying, okay, great, it dropped, and it sucks. It does. It does suck when you're like, you feel like your whole stomach is gonna jump out of your body because your 401k all of a sudden has dropped 34%, and now and today from the peak to today, it's dropped 18% for a lot of us, right? And so, you know, really though, one is to look at the long-term view, and two, people ask me all the time, how can I make my money make me money, right? That's the question that I get all the time. And I always say, you got to be in the game. You got to play the game, right? Because if you're just sitting in the sidelines, which you need to have some of, right? We talked about cash is king first. But above that, if you were not in the game in the last 10 years, you lost out on this huge upswing that we've had, right? Just in last year, some of people's portfolios were up 25% in 1 year. And so, yes, it did drop 25%, but still they just wiped out a year of gains, right? They still had 9 years prior to that for this to grow. And so it's really not about like, okay, so the stock market is down, I'm going to freeze, right? I'm going to stop contributing. I'm going to, right, like not do anything. The real lesson is to ride the wave, right? Because there is a cycle and it goes like this. And the chart, if you look at just overall chart for as long as the stock market has been around, it just goes up and down, right? Up and down, up and down, up and down. It's the cycle, just like everything else in life. There's a cycle to our bodies. There's a cycle to the moon. There's a cycle to even the stock market, right? And so really, your job, right, is not to time it. Your job is to be in it and go for the ride, right? And so most people are saying, well, you know what? We're heading into a recession, and there's talks that there's going to be, more coming. The truth is, none of us know, right? We are not future tellers, at least I am not, maybe you are. But the thing is if you're not in it, you can't actually have any of the gains or any of the losses, right? And so you really have to start understanding that there's risk that comes with the stock market. And unless you're in it, you don't have any of the downside, but you also don't have any of the upside, right? And so over time, it is best for us to continue, right? And as I look at it, is right now, stocks are down 25%, or in that one day, 34%. And guess what people are doing? What we always say is, when people are selling, you buy. When people are buying, you sell, right? And the truth is, we've lost nothing. If you don't sell, if you don't do the thing that the CARES Act is asking you to do, you actually have lost nothing. Your value has come down, but until you make that sell, you've lost nothing. You're just watching it and continue to ride. And really, for me, it's all about what's happening in your body as you're watching your portfolios go down, and you're going, breathe. How can I actually deal with this risk, right? Because there's going to be more of it in our lifetime, right? It just, in my professional life, there's been 2 already, right? I came out of school in the height of the tech bubble, right? Half of my friends lost a job within the first year, right? And then we found the 2008, the great financial crisis, where everyone just was flipping homes and whatnot, and they all lost it all, right? And so we will continue to see these cycles. We can't time it. You can see general trends. It's a 10-year sort of plus or minus, but if you're not in it, you can't actually, again, have any of the gains or any of the downfalls. And so that brings me up to the next point of what you hear often about is diversification, right? And why is diversification extremely important when it comes to investing? And the reason is, right, I love to travel. And so when I think about investing in things that I like, I might have bought an American Airlines stock, one stock, right? So at the height, again, right around mid-February, it took $30 to buy one American Airlines stock, right? On April 6th, just about 9 days ago, they were down to $9. So they lost 60%. The general market, right, lost right around 18% at this time, 34%, depending on what you're looking at. That they lost 60%, 66% of their value. And so this is where, when people are like, where should I invest? When you're talking about individual stocks, it's about diversification, right? You don't want all of your portfolio. Think about it. If your entire portfolio had been on American Airlines, you would have lost 60 something percent. Versus if you had just been with the public markets, you would have been 30, maybe up now to about 20, down 20% or so. That's a huge difference. And that really hones in on, right, really why we, what Warren Buffett says is diversification is protection against ignorance, right? When people talk about stocks, they're like, oh, what is the hottest stock right now? It's Tesla, Apple, whatever, right? And if you're interested in this time, travel, whatnot, your portfolio hinges on one or a few stocks. And when the whole thing crashes, your entire stock portfolio went down. And what we really need is what I look like, basically a pie, right? So if your 100% is your investment dollars, part of it needs to go into stocks, part of it needs to go into cash, and part of it needs to go into bonds, because basically cash will always sort of basically stay, right? You might have some interest, but your stock might have gone down, but stock and bonds go in opposite of each other. And so, those who were well diversified really in this time did not feel the entire drop of their portfolio, right? Theirs might be roughly down 10% because they had other things within their pie stick with their balance, right? So your stock might have gone down, but your cash stayed the same. So your overall portfolio didn't drop as much. And that's why it's like just not putting all your eggs into one basket. And so what does that mean? You can diversify within industries. You can diversify between asset classes, which you hear about cash or bonds. You can diversify on geographic locations, right? And you can diversify on company sizes. What you often hear is large cap, which are like Coca-Cola's and IBM's and very large companies, and then small companies. But really, what happens is none of us really, I truly find, is the most important thing is to decide what type of investor you are, right? Some people are like, it's too much. I would say 99% of people fall in this category, which is really, I just want to set it and forget it, right? There's maybe 1% of people that are like, ooh, I do want to understand, like, why is Apple valued? Why does Apple have so much cash? What does their financials look like? And truly, why something is valued at some price. And should I buy now? Should I buy later, right? For most part, where you should put your money, if you have the ability, is to buy a target fund. Because what happens within those funds, or even an index fund, what happens is if you open up your 401k and it says, okay, you can have all of these things, or you can have a target fund, and maybe I'm retiring in 20, 25 years. I can't do the math right now, but 20, 45, okay? What happens is that pie and the percentage within that pie between cash, bonds, and stock automatically changes over time. And so what happens is stock is the most risky of the investments, right? And so when you are investing at 20 years old, you might be like 90% in stocks. But when you're at 65, that percent drops to like probably 10 or 20. And so what happens with all of these funds that have sort of a target ending date is they're reallocating along the way for you and diversifying for you so you don't have to do the work. Because quite honestly, none of us is going to sit there and going, okay, I'm going to put 10% there, 10% there, 20%, right? No one, number one, has the time to do that. And number two, investments have become so sophisticated with artificial intelligence that they can do it all for you. So again, unless you are really, really interested in stocks and investments and this type of thing, I always say your time is much better spent about how you're going to increase your salary, how you're going to make a second source of income, than trying to pick the right stock at the right time. Right. Like I said, like most people ask me, like, where do we put our money? Put it into a diversified fund of some sort so that it just does the work for you. Okay. And lastly, we'll talk about what I think is the most interesting thing in all of personal finance, and I teach this in every class, is compound interest. And so most people are saying, oh, I'm going to freeze right now. I'm not going to contribute anymore. The stock market is going to shit and I don't want to do anything. And what I would say is, right, really, compound interest is what people really consider the eighth wonder of the world, right? And that what often is said is people who understand compound interest and play the game of compound interest, we earn a lot more than people who are just like, I'm not even going to be in it, right? And so how does this, and what we really need compound interest is a matter of time. And so again, as I look at this audience, most of us still have 20, 30, 40 years before we need to touch our retirement. And if you like to, there's a huge movement within the financial independence, retire early movement, right? Those people really have assets that actually continue to grow while spitting out an amount that they can live on, right, with dividend income. That could come from markets or they can come from real estate. And so I think compound interest is one of those things that, again, we hear about. We hear all these terms when it comes to investing: diversification, public market, stock market. And compound interest just gets thrown in with all of it. And when I really explain what it does, I think this happened in when I went to Tamara Mellon to teach this class, most people were like, whoa, okay, now we got to be in it, right? So this is basically how it works, okay? So the example that I give is if you're starting in your 20s and you're starting in your 30s, right? We started with zero, okay? So if you're 20 years old and you're gonna retire at 60, you have 40 years for that money to grow. If you started at 30, you have 30 years for that money to grow. And so same thing, we contribute 10,000 throughout our 20s and 30s and 40s and 60s. The person that's 30 in the 30s, they only have 30s, 40s, 50s, and basically 30 years to contribute. So they contribute the same amount. What happens at a 5% return rate is that the person started in the 20s will end up with $1.2 million in their bank account, versus if you started in your 30s, that number is $700,000, right? That is a huge, huge difference. And the numbers, we can move them to 30s and 40s, so on and so forth. And the reason for that is because the time, right? It had 10 more years to grow. So, the person who started in their 20s only contributed $100,000 more, but the interest and the growth of that money at only a simple 5%. Average stock market returns is 8 to 10%. And if you look at, so, right, the person in their 20s, the interest that they earned is $868,000. The person that started in their 30s earned $400,000. So it's all about interest and this idea of compound interest, putting the money away, setting it and forgetting it, and then letting it grow over time and follow that wave, right, of ability to make it grow. And so really, if you had to, let's say, well, I'm going to start later. I'm going to start in my 30s, but I still wanted to get to the same result. Instead of contributing $10,000, I would have to contribute $18,000 to get to the same result of $1.2 million. And so when people come and ask me, like, how do I become a millionaire? And how do I continue to, why should I continue to invest? Because the compound interest works best when you give it time, right? And so most people are thinking, well, this is a great time to stop contributing, right? And I'm like, no, this is actually a great time to stick to our financial habits that we've already established and continue to put the money in so that it has time to grow and give yourself, it's really like a money tree that just grows on its own with this compound interest along with that stock market, right? Because if you remember, right, S&P 500 was at 1441 in 2000, and it has doubled to roughly 2,700 currently today, right? So if you put in the money at points in time, it's going to grow. And so really it's such, this time, right, is in sort of wrapping up like today's around investment is really about widening our length of time, right? Our lens and saying, okay, we can't just look at what happened in really the last 6 weeks, but what does the stock market do over such long periods of time? And it really does produce 8 to 10% returns over time, right? And second, we really have to learn to take risks. Most of the people on this webinar are women. Women have a really hard time taking risks. And so they will, once they do, there's a lot of research out there that once we are familiar with investing, that we are actually better investors than men because we don't overreact. We're not in the market. There's no ego when it comes to investing for women. We simply follow the rules and let it ride. And so women investors are known to have better performance if I can actually get you to get into the market and actually play the game and learn the risk. I totally understand that it's a complete, there's a lot of risk in the unknown, or there's a lot of knowledge gaps around, well, I don't know what it is. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to put the money, right? And really, once we've learned enough, even just the 3 simple, things I taught you today, really allows you to start paying attention to your stock portfolios, right? The way I think about money and the relationship that we have with it is it's like any other relationship, right? The more we water the plants, the more we pay attention to it, what's happening, not react, but just saying, hey, how are you doing? What's going on here? what's going on with my investments? The more it will continue, you will get better about, your risk intake, your risk profile, understanding when someone's asking you a question about what you're investing in, you're not like, I don't want to talk about it, right? We're going to engage in these financial conversations because the risk of not is too high, right? All of us are not going to become millionaires if we don't invest, if we don't have a relationship with our money, right? And lastly, people are always like, you know what? I'm going to put it off until tomorrow, right? And this is something that I always love to say is, the best day to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The next best day is today and now, right? Take action. How small? I don't care. One action to understand, right? Where is my 401k? Do I have any money? How can I start? One small action that then puts you into what I call the road to your financial relationship, right? It's like you've had no relationship with this thing. We keep hearing about it, right? But we take one small step, whether that's putting $5 away a week, whatever it is, right? And to start developing that relationship, and so that we can really take advantage of things that are available to us, like diversification, compound interest, the cycle of the markets. It's been around for a really long time, right? But our engagement with it is what we need to start doing and not avoid what is the unknown, what is like where our fear, right, or freeze at this point. So, and and lastly, what I would say is now a lot of us, may have what I kept saying in this particular time is, a lot of times the excuse is, well, I don't have time to learn something new, or I don't have time to deal with that, right? And a lot of us, what I keep saying is what this virus has really done is shine a spotlight on what your excuse has been. And now you have the opportunity, right, to actually do something about it, right? So, don't wait until tomorrow, don't wait until some other time when another emergency happens. Start your engagement with start developing that financial, make it the best relationship that you ever have, because literally it follows you everywhere you go. And it's between friendships and relationship, it's the one relationship that really is makes us independent, makes us secure, and allows us to do what we want to do. So that's all I wanted to share with you guys today. I don't know if, oh, perfect. I forgot to say at the beginning that you guys could totally ask questions. If you're uncomfortable with, chatting it to everyone or unmuting yourself and asking, you can always chat Ashley privately, and then she will share those questions. Okay, so it looks like we do have a few questions. So,
and then Stacy, I have some too that were sent to me. So,
awesome.
yeah.
For Christians, does it make sense to contribute, for example, $20 more if you can to the retirement investment that you have already been making? Or should you stick with the usual contribution and continue with that? I would say if your cash balance is totally okay and you can find another $20 to put toward that investment, the answer is yes, always. What I always like to say is we are the most important person in our lives, and our future self, our tomorrow self is just as important when it comes to our money. So every time you put money away for your future self, right, is a good thing to do. And I want you to also practice like thanking yourself and make that a positive thing, right? It's like, why should I put $20 away? Does it really make a difference? Yes. If you had put $20 now, in some time with compound interest in the cycle of the market, it's going to grow to something else, right? So what I like to say is if you can continue to invest in your future self, that allows you independence in the future, even if it's $20, it's a good step to take. Someone said, it seems like most people are selling their stocks right now. Does it mean that now is the best time to buy stocks since everyone is selling? Yes. So people are freaking out. And so what is happening is the people that are living in crisis mode, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's some people are being forced to sell their stocks because they don't have enough in their emergency savings. And so one, they're selling it at a loss, right? And two, they have no other options, right? Which we have a lot of sympathy for people that are in those situations. But it is also a great time for you to buy, because the way I look at it, the stock market went on sale, right? And so just like you would buy a pair of those jeans when Nordstrom's having a sale, what do? You go and you buy it, right? And you're saying, well, because what's going to happen is what people are saying is there is another dip coming. And that is true. And so the other thing we didn't really talk about is this idea of sort of dollar cost averaging, which means you buy a stock at this value and you keep buying it as it goes down. And so your cost of all of the stocks you buy averages to somewhere in the middle, right? And that in some future months or years is going to be somewhere over here. And so you buy on the down, and then you and then you sell on the top, right? So yes, but the trick is that most people are holding mostly because they are fearful that another drop is coming. Most people who are really into finances are basically saying, yes, there's another drop coming. And when that happens, you're just going to keep buying, right? You're going to keep buying at a 25% discount, at a 50% discount, because what's going to happen over a long period of time, right, is that it's going to come back up. Now, if you're talking about individual stocks, though, that is hard to tell, right? So I don't typically recommend people buy one stock at a time, because the risk, like the American Airlines, right, is really, really dropping of 66% is really high. But I can look at it like, well, it's $10. It used to be 30. And I can go buy some, right? Because we know the airlines are going to open again. We know the airlines got a bill out from the CARES Act as well. And so it's going to continue to come back up. But your risk profile is what's really important, is can you stomach another drop for it to have it come back up? Those are all the questions in there. Okay.
I have more. This is in relation to, I have a few about 401k. When you suggest maxing out our 401k, are you suggesting maxing out the match amount, or beyond that to the max we're allowed to put in? That's one.
So my always. So if you have enough emergency savings, the second step is always to max out. Max out meaning not just max the match, max to the whatever the highest contribution rate is, which I think right now is 16,500.
Okay.
Because what I want people to do is to invest in their future self, right? And so the huge difference between, usually match is like 100% dollar for dollar up to 3% of your compensation, or some really complicated calculation. But roughly it's like $3,000 or something like that. So the difference between 3,000 and 16 is a huge, huge difference. And year over year, right? Remember that compounding interest over time, right? The more you put in now, and at the earlier time, you're allowing that money to grow. You're giving your future self a huge favor for it to grow 10% on average over time. And so, and what I like about people maxing out on the 401k is usually it's automatic. It'll hurt the first few months, you're like, oh, ow, that really hurt. I'm used to spending this much money, and now I have to spend this much. The truth of it is that you will get used to it, just like everything else. We used to make this much money and now we make this much. And guess what? We used to spend this much and now we're spending this much. And so we're going to take it down a little bit and help your future self, because you think about it right now, right? I'm in my early 40s. I've had 20 years to contribute over time. The difference of that $3,000 versus a $10,000 or $16,000 country is huge over time. Not only is it going to be $200,000 just in contributions, and the interest over 20 years would have been another some large amount. And so you always want to max out, and it hurts. I get it. It totally hurts, but you will get used to living without it. But I always say you must have your emergency savings account first before you max it out. Or I like to do a dual thing. We like to set a goal for what our emergency money should be. And then we essentially sort of dial it in. So we continue to do two things at once.
Okay, another 401k question. What if your company offers 401k with 25% match, but now because of coronavirus, they cancel the match until further notice? Should we still put into the 401k or somewhere else?
Same. Put it in the 401k. On top of what I just said, 401k allows you to reduce your taxes. So the only other thing I would say is if you make under the Roth IRA limit, which is about $135,000, don't quote me on that, something in that, and you have the ability to put money in a Roth IRA, that's also a really great instrument.
Okay.
And the reason for that, do you guys want to know why Roth is better than regular 401k?
Yeah. You should, yeah.
So basically, when you contribute to a Roth, most people are like, oh, don't do it. Like, you're not getting any tax benefit. What happens is that money is growing, and when you take it out, it's tax-free. So for a 401k, you're contributing to it and you're taking the tax advantage now, which means in some further future, right, you're going to have to pay taxes when you start withdrawing money, right? And so I always like to say, I like to have as much control over my money as possible. 401k is really a great instrument to put away a ton of money. But if you are, under that Roth, you can put a certain amount to your Roth that allows to grow tax-free, and when you withdraw, there's no taxes on that. So I can do whatever I want with this money when I want to withdraw it, right? Versus in the 401k, right? Look, they just passed this $2 trillion CARES Act. That money isn't going to come from thin air, although it feels like it has, right? Somebody's going to be paying for it, and it's going to be the taxpayers at some point in time, right? And so what I always say is, taxes, will it probably go down? I don't think so, right? It's going to continue to go up. So in some future time, you are going to pay tax on that money. So if you are under that 135 or whatever the limit is, I can get that for you guys in a little bit, is to contribute to Roth as well, if you have an option.
Okay. I have two more. I haven't invested any money into the public stock market, and I've started a bit when the market crashed a few weeks ago. Do you recommend taking the money I'll receive from the stimulus package and put it into the stock market if I'm contributing to everything else?
Yeah, so again, make sure you have, so what I'm telling you with the stimulus track is, if you don't have that emergency savings, put it in there first, okay? But if you do have that whole thing stashed up, then yes, continue to put money in it.
Okay. And then one last one. I'm self-employed with a Roth traditional IRA investment property. I contribute the max amount of each year with a secure emergency fund. I would like to contribute more to my retirement, but how can I do that?
So without knowing all the details, I can't tell you that. But if you are a business owner, yes.
No. Yeah.
Say the question one more time.
I'm self-employed with a Roth interest.
Self-employed means you're a business owner of some sort or a sole proprietor. So one of the great things about being a business owner or sole proprietor is this thing called the SEP IRA. So while the general public works for a company that offers a 401k as their retirement vehicle, some do and some don't. For business owners that are only you have the option to contribute to what is known as the SEP IRA. And so the SEP IRA, and this is where you need to talk to your tax accountants, your SEP IRA has a much larger capability to contribute. So for example, let's say your net income from your business was $100,000. You are able to contribute 25% of that $100,000 to your retirement fund. Okay. And so generally everyone's at 16.5, you can contribute up to 25,000. And so if you are a sole proprietor, and you own your business or you are self-employed, you have the ability to have this product. So you must talk to your tax accountant who can really help you with that calculation and support you in that.
Okay. That is all I have. Let me just make sure I don't have any more.
Yes, and the last one is, would I recommend any apps for investments? No, I don't. I subscribe to sort of simplicity. And so, if you bank with, one of the problems is that, that I see is that people move from job to job, right? And so they have like 401k here and then a 401k there and so they forget that they have these accounts. And so what I like, the way that I coach is all about simplicity, making your life simple so that you can have a really easy relationship with your finances. So they're really great apps, but if you have your money already at a bank, all right, and you know, you have a brokerage account there, just keep putting money in the same bank. Or, I don't know anything about Robinhood, but some of these new robo advisors are really, really popular, and most of my friends in the investment field are like, use those, right? So they could be Alvest, which is a platform that is specifically made for women. With Betterment is also another big one that people are there are, I can't tell you that there's so many apps and so many things out there, but what happens is, oh, I switched my phone, I forgot about that app. Right. Same thing with Mint. It's like overwhelming. I'm not going to do it. We're going to talk about in the budgeting session 2 weeks from now. But keep it simple. If you want to go with Robinhood, great. I don't have any recommendation on any of these apps. My simple recommendation would be to keep everything simple and in one shot if possible, so that you're not forgetting. Literally, I had a client find $25,000 of retirement 2 weeks ago because I just kept asking the question. So tell me about your job history. Where were you working from 2000 to 2005? Where were you working from 2005 to 2010? And we went through all her jobs and she found $25,000. With interest rates so low on debt, would you recommend leveraging this in any way to invest? I think that's a really, really great question. I think leveraging debt to invest is risky always, because you have to pay back that debt at some point in time, right? And so what happens a lot of times is people play options, which means I'm going to borrow some amount of money to buy something else. I'm not a huge proponent of taking on debt. I think you have to be if you are a sophisticated, again, coming back to what kind of investor are you? If you are a sophisticated investor and you can really stomach borrowing money to invest, because then you make the spread, it's, that is your, personality or your aptitude, right? But right now, if we're looking at it, if we're going to borrow money and we still have to pay interest on that, even if it's 1 or 2%, if you buy stock at this and it drops, right, how are you going to pay that back? And that's the only thing I would caution against. But again, it really comes down to, what kind of investor are you? Are you comfortable borrowing money to invest? I like to borrow money typically just for assets that are collateralized, right? If you're borrowing money for a car, if you're borrowing money for a real estate investment, that's true leverage versus borrowing money dollar for dollar to put into a stock market, because if it goes down, you're going to it's going to be hard for you to make that back. Whereas in real estate, you're borrowing, all right, you're putting a 20% down, but you're buying a house that's, let's say you're buying $1 million home and you're borrowing 20%. So you're only putting down 20% or $200,000. The asset, the growth of that asset is at $1 million. So that's true leverage, right? Versus if you're borrowing dollar for dollar, that's a much, it's really tight in terms of that, those arbitrage in the gain. Any other questions?
I got nothing here.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you everybody again for attending today. Please do, I love doing this, so please share this with your friends. Next week is going to be about small business and cash flow planning. And the week after that will be about budgeting. So please do follow my Instagram. We will be announcing, the topics again, and just sharing, financial tips and knowledge along the way. And please do share with your friends. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy.
Bye.
Bye.